the sort of opening briefing on the condition of our stats.
Thank you. Thank you, Phil, for the kind introduction. Also, thanks everyone for coming. It's the week before Christmas, and you've chosen to spend an evening listening to us talk about statistics. I hope it's going to be an interactive discussion, and we all get something out of it. So what I'm going to do is start at the beginning and do a bit of a reminder of what happened at the ONS, which is well documented in the Deborah review, and then I'll talk through at an organisation level what we've done and what we are doing to reset the organisation and the culture, which I think is the foundation for better statistics. May not be the normal thing that we talk about as economists, but is really important. And then I'll just take you through a bit of a sense of what we've done already to improve statistics and what's to come before concluding, and hopefully that will set the scene. It'll take me hopefully about 15 minutes to get through the presentation. So this is my Deborah review redux, and the kind of short version of what Sir Robert Devereux said is the ONS have been trying to do too much too quickly on too many fronts. And as part of that, underlying that story was a failure to respond to concerns raised by STAR. That, I think, reflected four things coming together. One had its roots in the pandemic and basically an explosion in the demand for real-time data, how households were coping, how businesses were reacting, how the virus itself was spreading. And that increase in outputs and frequency of outputs, I think, ultimately proved to be unsustainable. An additional theme through this period, probably predates the pandemic a bit, is a lot of ambition on data. And the office took on a lot of ambition. One thing I'd pull out would be an integrated data service to bring together data across all government departments, not just for the purpose of producing statistics, but just for the purpose of supporting government analysis. And that's a big broadening in scope that I think was too much. And then a second thing was an attempt to build an admin-only census very, very quickly. One thing, one headwind, if you like, that made all that ambition and broadening in outputs even more challenging has been a deterioration in household survey response rates, which basically made it much more expensive to maintain household surveys and increased the need to prioritise. And one theme, and it's well reported in the Deborah review, and I felt it just listening to people since I joined in August, is a tendency for leadership at the time not to listen to warning signs and sometimes even to discourage challenge, which meant that there wasn't a quick enough response to some things going wrong. The overall result was a deterioration in the quality of core statistics and also a failure to deliver on some of those change programs. So that was, in shortfall, Sir Robert's conclusions in July. What's been happening since then? So I joined in August. My boss, Darren Teeney, joined in August too. And there's been as I'll come on to, quite a reset at the top of the ONS. Since Darren started, one thing we've done is to recast the mission of the ONS, which is in the computer screen, on the computer screen, in the corner, to deliver trustworthy, independent, high-quality statistics that underpin the UK's most critical economic and societal decisions and inform the public. And it's that most critical that's doing quite a lot of work. And what we've been doing since August is really narrowing the scope of what we're doing, of what the ONS is doing, to make sure that we're prioritising quality over quantity. So we've already closed down that integrated data platform programme as a service to government analysts, and we're focusing that capability solely on improving statistics now, starting, as I'll come on to, with a flagship project to bring together payroll data and labour force survey data. We've stopped a lot of analytical work, about 30 to 40 people worth, that's not needed to improve statistics. The ONS had a kind of open door service to the Cabinet Office to do analysis on their behalf, and we've redirected that, and we've launched strategic reviews of health statistics, crime statistics, and subnational statistics to look at what we can do to narrow what we're doing there. And in each of those areas, they are the three areas which have expanded in recent years. Health particularly, and I think just to put this on the record, I think the ONS did do an amazing job in the pandemic on health statistics and in other areas too, in innovating and stepping into a gap. But we now have a UK health security agency that probably can take on more of that work. And so, given the need to repair economic statistics, it's a space that we don't need to be in the same way anymore. And there are areas of crime and subnational statistics that we can step back on. Two, we're having conversations with users on all three, and then we'll updates in the new year on where they've got to precisely. We also have got a broader ambition to consolidate our number of outputs and cut them by 10% next year. All of that has allowed us to put in place a recruitment campaign to basically put 150 people behind improving economic statistics. We're also trying to create a different environment within the ONS, and it's all about basically restoring trust inside the ONS and trust outside it. There are three parts to that. I've already touched on one of them. One is creating space. People are not going to succeed if they're doing too much on too many fronts. You risk setting people up to fail. So part of that is narrowing what we're doing in our business as usual work, but we're also going through now a 3-year business planning exercise, and we're only going to take on as much change as we can deliver. It's much better to have a realistic ambition and then build momentum over time than try and take on too much and get stuck. So that's a really important thing that we're going through now on the change side, and that does, I think, set people up for success. Another important principle is working in the open. Working in the open, and we published our improvement plans. We are publishing quarterly progress reports. The first one was on the 4th of December, so you can see what we've done, but also what we've not done and where the risks are. And we're being very open and upfront about risks, so you can hold us to account on how we're handling them. We've set up a external steering group to bring the outside in, and we've got my former colleagues at the bank, Hugh Pill, the Office of Budgetary Responsibility, the Cabinet Office, and the Treasury, giving us a steer on priorities too, and also bringing healthy challenge. And we've reset leadership. So we've got a new leadership charter at the ONS to build trust, to encourage challenge, to listen, and to act decisively on priorities. And we've already started to embed that in performance review processes and so on. I think it's making a difference. And more broadly, so I'm new, my boss Darren is new, we've got a new people director, we'll appoint a new change director this week, and we've got a process underway to appoint a new Director General for technology by the new year. So that's pretty much the top team. We've also appointed a new executive director for the population census. So quite a big change there quite quickly. So that's broadly what I was going to say in terms of what we're doing at an organisational level. I'm sure we can get into some of the detail there if people want to. I'm just going to talk through as well now what we're doing to improve the surveys and the statistics they serve. Starting with the most difficult, right, which is definitely labour market statistics published this morning. A very tidy release that's been covered well, I think. A lot of text on this slide, and there's basically a number of strands. One is to improve the quality of the existing labour force survey. As I touched on before, the response rate in that survey fell a lot during the pandemic, reflected in part change in behaviour, but also lack of resources in terms of the interviewer community. We have bolstered the interviewer numbers by 16% now. We're interviewing and an additional 2,000 monthly across all our surveys. The response rate has lifted. It's still depressed at about 33%, but it has lifted by about 8 percentage points. And crucially for the labour force survey as a whole, and this happened broadly from September, that achieved sample size is back to the pre-pandemic point. And the APR, I noted, recognised in their latest EFO that the quality of that data and coherence of it with other sources is much improved. Still not all the way there. The response rate is down, and there's a lingering question that's hard to answer about the degree of non-response bias in that survey. So we're attacking that from a number of angles. The first is a new project which is up and running to link the LFS survey responses and non-responses to payrolls data. So we can then answer the question, if you don't respond to the labour force survey, are you more or less likely to be employed, which will give us a really good way to get a handle on that bias. We've got a proof of concept established for 2021, but we've now got that working over time to measure bias in that survey, and we'll have a report on progress soon in the new year. We've got another way into it, which is basically, it's similar in some ways, to try and mix together different sources of labour market data. So from the self-assessment returns and the payroll data, you can, with a lag of 2 years, have a complete measure of employment. And obviously the payroll component of that is available in near enough real time. And so we're working through a new project with ESCO to integrate different labour market indicators and see if we can have a composite measure to adjust for any bias in the labour force survey that way too. And finally, the long-term solution is this transformed labour force survey is digital first, much cheaper to run for that reason. We launched a shortened core survey in July. We worked through some enhanced assisted complete features in September to improve some respondents' ability to complete that survey. We've got a tested AI system to code occupations in that survey and also to ask people about their occupation. So it's like chatting to ChatGPT to query what occupation you work in, what industry you work in, to basically mimic an interview online. That's working well too, and is, I think, from conversations with international colleagues, best in class internationally. We have got a hiccup, which is it's taking a bit longer to complete our data rotation module, which you're in the survey 5 waves, and if you're in the second wave, you don't want to fill in the same stuff all over again, and so you auto-complete that. And that's taking a bit longer to complete than expected. That will be April rather than January, but we still will have that completed. We think ahead of taking stock on the TFS in the middle of next year. So that's kind of where we are. This is the biggest thing we have to do, I think, to restore quality is to transition to the TFS. Price statistics. So a lot of things have already happened there. We made an improvement to the methods to deal with late returns and partial information on rental and house price statistics in August, which basically reduces their susceptibility to future revisions. That's done, and that's in production now. And then in October, we reintroduced producer price statistics, sometimes called factory gate inflation, which corrected an error that had led to that series to be suspended back in April. And we've got improved quality weights and a strengthened production process in that series. It's better than it was before we discovered the error. Lots of great things to come on price statistics. The most exciting thing is scanner data, on track to do that for March 2026. And when we do that, we will have data from half of the grocery sector covering 300 million prices per month. So we go from sampling randomly in the shops, 25,000 prices manually, people going to shops to having 300 million prices per month. Dramatic increase in coverage, but importantly, also bringing in the effect of store card discounting, for example. So we're actually measuring the prices paid at the till rather than just those on the shelf. Lots of other things we need to to bear in mind after we get to that point. We're working through in our business planning. We know there's a lot of interest in accrediting the household cost indices, and we'll look at how we can do that. There's more that we could do to modernise the end-to-end production of producer prices too, as well as further opportunities to onboard private sector data sources. So watch this space as we work through our 3-year plan. Trade and GDP statistics. So we have made an important, I think, change to the monthly GDP release. And we have shifted our attention from the month-on-month change to look at the 3-month on 3-month change for GDP, reversing something that we did during the pandemic. My personal view is that's a much more interesting indicator. The monthly change is very volatile. The average outturn for monthly GDP growth is 0.1, volatility is 0.2. It's quite obvious. It's quite often minus 0.1 once every 3 months. That's not a headline in my view, but a minus 0.1 on 3-month and 3-month, which we had in the latest release, is more interesting. That doesn't happen very often, so much better focus to have. Really important methods change in the Blue Book and Pink Book updates this year. We've got enhanced data on the amount of R&D in the economy by tying in the survey data there to the admin data sources. I think we're one of the few NSIs in the world to have done that. We've also got a much better accounting for the pharmaceutical sector, which manages global supply chains out of the UK. And then we're now measuring part of the profit that does that rightly in the UK. With the change that we've made there. So some important methods changes. Lots of things going on the business surveys that underpin GDP statistics. So the biggest one, which we're working to complete the day one of next year, is a doubling in the coverage of a statistical business register, bringing in lots of smaller firms from 3 million to 6 million firms in total. And much more modern software around that register too, which will allow us to do lots of new things more easily. And a big program we have as well is to expand our large case unit. So multinational companies, increasingly complex, and figuring out how much of their activities in the UK you can only really do by talking bilaterally. And so we're putting more resources into that. And we've got a lot of work, just like on the household surveys too, to embed AI within the survey processing business. The really big thing for us on GDP statistics is the new international standards that are coming in that we have to implement. We're trying to implement by 2030, as are many other countries. This is all about bringing the GDP statistics up to be more relevant to the modern economy. So accounting for data, for AI, cloud computing, as well as updating industry and product classifications. Really complex set of things one has to do there to sort the systems out first, so we can make the changes, and we're working through the plan for doing that. But we think we can do it by 2030. That was a brief overview of where things are. Quickly to wrap up, I just wanted to be open on where our issues and risks are. So we have had a major issue across the board this year with the quality of source data. That's underpinned errors on public sector finances and also on the trade statistics. And we've been working very closely with HMRC there. We've got a good relationship. They've launched their own review, and I'm very pleased that the OSR has also come in behind that. And our new data sourcing strategy is going to help us tighten the controls in that area. In the very near term, in terms of risks, the biggest thing is we're still working through those 150 roles to fill the plan. I think we can do that by the first quarter of next year, but we're still working through that. The bigger, many things have struck me as joining the ONS, but one of the biggest things is how much the organisation is trying to do. I still think it's too much. And if you try and do too much change at the same time, you're going to get in a muddle. So we still do need to work through that and get to a more realistic ambition, which would be a key feature of the coming business planning round that we're going through. Yeah, and then on the horizon, I mentioned those big new kind of economic standards by 2030. We have to deliver a census by 2031. So we need to find some way of doing those two things together so that they don't conflict. And I think given a flat budget constraint, that is going to require a efficiency agenda in some way. So that's gets me to the end to conclude. So, I mean, 3 messages to conclude. There is a long way to go, and we are still kind of wrestling with too many errors that we're finding. But I do think a recovery is underway, and key foundations are in place. The quality of the surveys and the statistics are improving. We are working in the open, and we would welcome your feedback. We will focus on the right things if you give us feedback. And I think it's pretty clear that we need to prioritise. And so give us your priorities and tell us where you think we should do that. Yeah, and then I've tried this line a number of times, the last one on the slide. When you think of the ONS, you should think of your National Statistics Institute needs you. And I say that because it is yours. It's for everyone in this room. It's there to reflect the country to itself. And it will only do that if we have the right data from households and businesses, but also if we know what you want and we focus on the right things. I've always thought data is a team sport. It's a collaboration between the providers, the users, and the producers. And so, yeah, hopefully we can strengthen that collaboration tonight. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, James. Should have said that this is being recorded, just so everybody can aware. We're just going to have some more short presentation from the rest of the panel. Rebecca, you're the person.
Sure. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this. It's very nice to be back at the National Institute where I worked for 20 years, and great to see the new and exciting direction that David's taking the place. But in particular, it's very nice to be here for this discussion, because it was at the National Institute that ESCO was based in its initial years following the Bean Review. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to make 3 points in relation to rebuilding national statistics. Number 1, I think that if we want an environment in which the ONS can continuously improve economic statistics, then I think we need to change the conversation around them, i.e. the way we talk about economic statistics. Number 2, it has in many ways got harder to produce relevant economic statistics. This is something that national statistics agencies around the world are facing, and it's related to a large extent to digitalization, and there's a need for collective action on this. And last, of course, the Economic Statistics Recovery Plan is very welcome. And I guess I just wanted to take this opportunity to highlight that there is a worry it may be too ambitious, and I think you've alluded to that, James, already, at least in the short run. So on the first of these, the need to change the conversation around economic statistics, what I mean is that I think the way we talk about economic statistics tends to hinder curiosity, which is quite a crucial ingredient in maintaining relevant economic statistics. So we often talk about economic statistics as a certain outcome rather than an estimate or a proxy for what's going on in the economy. And then we get surprised when the economic statistics get revised. We have a much better understanding that when someone produces an economic forecast, that forecast may change because new information becomes available, and we readily accept uncertainty around that. And I think it's probably fair to say that we generally have less tolerance or understanding when economic statistics get revised. I think basically we don't acknowledge enough the uncertainties that accompany any estimate. Economic statistics, they get revised because new information becomes available, because there's better methodologies, better data sources that can be implemented. And of course, that leads to new judgments on what constitutes a best estimate of what's going on in the economy. So it seems to me that an environment in which improvements in economic statistics are perceived by default as mistakes, that's going to be an environment that's more likely to stifle curiosity and less likely to yield improvements in economic statistics. So this is compared to an environment where we accept that economic statistics are not hardwired fact in and of themselves. Second point I wanted to make was that it's got harder to produce relevant economic statistics. There's two challenges here. Both are related to digitalization and articulated to some degree in the Bean Review. One challenge is that digitalization has changed the way that in the economy that we produce and consume. And what that means is that economic statistics as they stand may miss a lot of what's going on, or key developments in the economy may be hidden under the surface of the economic statistics. And there's lots of things to that. It's quite complex, which I won't discuss now. And in some ways, we've been here before, because by their very nature, economic statistics are always going to be playing catch up with economic reality because the economy changes. But I think that the rapid pace of economic change with digitalization, sort of fundamental change the way things work, just highlights the importance of the collective endeavor that's needed. So statistical agencies can't resolve these things on their own. There needs to be international collaboration on these things. And of course, also with academia, that's important as well. The other challenge coming with digitalization is the proliferation of new forms of data collected through all of our interactions with digital systems. So this is like organic data, if you like. And all of these new data sources, they can help make economic statistics much more timely, accurate, granular, etc. But they also increase user demand rather enormously. And that's all fine, were it not for the fact that that demand requires quite a lot of resource to meet, and investment in new methodologies, and also coordination across a number of different players in the statistical system. That's not insignificant. I mean, it's relatively easy to use some of these data to draw inference about various things, but it's another thing to turn these into meaningful official economic statistics. So the last remark I wanted to make, or point I wanted to flag, is that, of course, the Economic Statistics Recovery Plan is very welcome, but I guess a number of us might worry that it's a little bit on the ambitious side. That's not because I have any suggestion for how you would reprioritize things, I'm afraid. But just to say that, the plan is a long list of the many things that might be necessary or useful to do. So I just would caution against a situation where one outcome might be just disappointment by default, right? I don't think that's necessary. So I liked the way that the delivery timeline for the TLFS has been couched now, which is that it's going to be evidence-led, right? So it's the quality that will drive the agenda. So I just hope that's an approach that can be taken more generally.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Rebecca. So the view from business, if that's what it is.
I mean, I will incorporate the view from business for sure. But as the ONS know only too well, it's not always easy to get businesses to share information, even with their own representatives. But obviously, they are key suppliers into the data framework. So some of that is under compulsory surveys, which are a bit less compulsory than you might think. They don't really have response rates anywhere near 100%, but that's pretty normal by international experience. Of course, what they look for is fairly unsurprising. As a data provider, they want the process to be quick and easy. They want to have a good user experience. They want to have confidence that the ONS are trying to minimize the burdens upon them and using other data sources wherever possible. They want their time to be respected. They want, if you're doing a telephone survey, for that to be booked. They want completion, if it's online, to be as easy as possible. They don't want to feel like they're providing duplicate information to multiple departments. What I would say just on that, in respect of the switch across to administrative sources, which are looked fondly upon by departments such as ONS and indeed HMRC, one does have to be conscious of sort of the second order burdens that can create for business. So when when the likes of HMRC, their digital transformation program entails more regular reporting of data by businesses, including smaller businesses, which requires them to buy new, different software, which they are not feeling particularly inclined and enthusiastic about when their costs are already going up very significantly. So one does have to be a bit sort of conscious of the current context as well. In terms of how businesses consume economic data, well, for smaller companies, it's mostly via other people, I mean, like Bloomberg, for example, more their reportage than the terminals. That's definitely the city side of things. So via media, other analysts, including myself, I do a lot of presentations to different types of business groups, including to other some of the smaller business associations like bathroom manufacturers is always one of my favorite. We have an insane number of business organisations in this country. And what they want in that context, what they want from the data is, of course, the story. They want to set their own business experience in the context of broader macroeconomic and policy trends, be they regional, national, international, or sectoral. So the adjustment in the data architecture to the recognition of new sectors is really important to businesses on the ground. They want to know whether their own experience is the same, is different, is it more positive, is it more negative? Sometimes that can lead, if their experiences are sufficiently different, that can lead them to, not really believe the official data. I get many questions on inflation, for example. They're interested in the growth opportunities, the investment opportunities, which of their market sectors are growing more quickly than others, what's affecting their customers, their clients, their suppliers, confidence, costs. So on the bathroom manufacturers one, for example, they care a lot about the housing market. Everyone buys a new bathroom, or new builds put in new bathrooms, so they care a lot about housing market activity, transactions, interest rates, construction activity, skill shortages in the sector. They can get very geekily interested in ways you wouldn't necessarily expect. Businesses are always very interested in inflation data. Their customers' exposure to generalized inflation, of course, affects demand for them as well. It reflects in some of their costs, but a lot of them don't understand inflation, which I find similarly, businesses never understand productivity when I speak to them. They don't understand inflation either. The difference between price growth and price levels, between consumer and producer inflation. It was really upsetting when we lost the producer inflation for a while, because I had my inflation sandwich explanation: input, output, consumer. So they don't understand that. They don't understand always why their own cost experience is different to the inflation numbers. They will say, well, that's just because your data is wrong. So I do a bit of a defence for what it is worth on that front. Of course, they care about the labour market as well. Lots of interest in how AI is affecting labour market data. They care about their, obviously, wage data a lot, and it does influence their wage setting. And they're interested in hiring conditions. But what does this tell us about statistical priorities? Well, as I say, we're telling them this story about the economy from which they're making investment choices, they're setting wages, they're making hiring decisions, they're understanding the financial situation and market priorities. So what they want is stability over time in that. So this comes back to the point about, you can call them what you want, revisions. We were talking about whether to call them updates the other day. And there is something to be said about how we talk about changes in data over time. But from a business perspective, they don't, unless there's fraud and error, of course, which one likes to think isn't too much, they don't see significant changes in their own business story over time, and they don't expect to see them for the general economy either. And when they see that, even if it's big updates, Blue Book, etc., a big methodological change which completely changes the shape of the economic narrative, it causes them to be highly skeptical. So for them, and this is where it probably differs from the city, they care more about accuracy and stability than they do about timeliness. Timeliness can be got from elsewhere, but for the official data, it's more about accuracy overspeed. And then just on the ONS's strategic priorities, I've been looking at ONS data for far too many years, and the ONS website. Not going into that. And of course, we're all familiar with some of sort of the recent issues that have arisen, particularly for the LFS. But I think what is noticeable is some of that is a continuation of some pre-existing trends, and perhaps some sort of lack of strategic, or the right strategic choices being made in the past. And I think they're about past major methodological changes which we had in business investment, for example, which led to that time series being truncated at 1997 when it had gone back to 1965. And the ONS really fought against everybody. He was just splicing it together. Bank of England was splicing it together and putting that out there for everybody, and fought a long time against the obvious primacy of time series. Data errors, they come up. It's been unfortunate. We've had a significant collection of them recently, and they come from other people, but they're then spotted by other people. They're not spotted by the ONS. So why is the ONS still not spotting errors, which the likes of the city, who have got lots of resources to find these things out, spot instantly and go, that can't possibly be correct. We know what the policy is. That number doesn't match whatsoever. And I think finally, just the Devereux report, we've already been taken through its headlines. It was quite sobering in terms of its findings in relation to the organisational challenge. And I guess we're not really used to thinking about the relationship between organisational capability in that way and strategy with statistical, methodological issues. But of course, methodological issues involve choices. Right. They always have priorities and choices. There's always been a bit of a balance to be struck between statistical purity and analytical pragmatism. It's never going to be perfect, but it's really heartening to see what's been coming out since the summer in terms of the shaping of organisational priority, and hopefully we will, those will bring to bear material improvements for us all.
There's loads there, Stuart. Thanks very much, Anna. Rob, finally, your thoughts on where we are on data.
Thank you. How to follow that? Pleasure of going last. So let me start by. I don't know if you remember Joni Mitchell, Big Yellow Taxi, but I was just puzzling my brain because I knew there was a quote from a song somewhere anyway. She goes, "Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone." And I thought that was a pretty apt sort of description of where we are. And I think there's two parts of this which have gone. One is the statistics have deteriorated, which it turns out was really important. Other countries will watch quite carefully what happens if you squeeze policy on economic statistics. It might seem you don't need them, but eventually we do. The second aspect is I wonder if we were always really this uncertain about where the economy was, but everyone was led to believe, or chose to believe it was worth. And now it's absolutely obvious that we don't always know exactly where GDP is or the unemployment rate or job growth, which is quite unsettling. People look for someone to blame and changes himself in that seat. Thank you, Jane. I guess, I throw a lot of criticism way. I think, therefore, it's incumbent on me to welcome the changes setting out. They've already discussed a lot. My expertise is not on whether they will work or not, whether they're sufficient or not. I can just say that they look pretty comprehensive, and if it does work, it will help. There have been improvements already. From a user's perspective, aside from the fact that some statistics are now published that weren't, it's kind of hard to detect them, but I hope it will come through soon. I think, thank you for taking it on so honestly. I think it was really important to own up to the errors. You identified the culture. I think that's probably, it's always the first step. I think for the rest of this, probably like to split this into two. One, I think some things to think about on the statistics that haven't yet been covered in there. It's already ambitious enough, so please focus on the bit afterwards. The second is what the costs of this are, the cost of this experience, and maybe the ongoing costs of this feeling of uncertainty, if that is genuinely true. I mean, for what it's worth, I think that describes where I am. Right? I think my first question a few years ago when I saw some economic data was surprising to try and dig into it and find out why it was surprising. Now my first response is, well, is it true? And that might be right or wrong, but I think that's the trust deficit to get over, and it will take a long time. I thought on the errors we could probably split them into three. I think there's errors of commission, so that's where the ONS I've just dragged down the side of the spreadsheet, say, and it happens to be hard pasted. I'm sure it's more technologically sophisticated than what I do, and I of course would never accidentally drag down the side of the spreadsheet. But there's certainly errors of commission. I think those are unforgivable. They need to be recognised, right, and fixed, which is the second. I think, which are things less on your work plan, errors of omission. So you talked about what a gold standard statistic would be. I think we recognise that they're going to be revised. We recognise they're uncertain, but they need to be unbiased. And I think I don't know whether it's always true, but there are a lot of key economic data where the revisions often go in one direction. And I think that's an error of omission, this sort of I think the word you use, but being willing to investigate, or even noticing. I've revised down. You probably had this out already now, but I've revised down the claimant count for 77 for the last 82 months. Maybe that's not ideal. We should have a look at this. It's quite a long time, right? And I think those biased estimates then come into the business side of this, and it leads to that trust deficit as well. So they need to be unbiased. If the story is already always changing in one direction, that's quite a problem. The claimant count's one, payrolls growth is another, PAYE median pay is another one. They almost always, or more often than not, get revised in the same direction. Chris Giles had a great column on GDP, on average revised up. Saving rate is on average revised down. We can't move for analysis of why saving rate is not 10%. But the average revision in 2022 is minus 10%. If we roll back 2 years, we could be sitting here having exactly the same conversation about whether saving rate will shut up, and it turned out that it didn't. That's actually one of the hardest variables. I feel pretty criticism that way. It's not always warranted, but I think the key is that the revision to that, it tends to be biased, and that's a real problem. If you couldn't be sure which way it's going to be revised, that's different to seeing an average revision one direction, and it overwhelmingly happened on the most quarters. That's an error of omission. I think those are the sorts of things probably are covered a bit by culture, I suspect, but I think a lot of what you covered is more errors of commission. Revisions, revisions are going to happen. I think it's the problem of the first two sets of errors that then makes revisions look like an error as well. So you go, well, okay, payrolls is always revised up, the claimant count's always revised down. The GDP should have moved 3%. What on earth are these guys doing? And that's not a mistake. It should be revised that much, but I think it adds to that trust deficit. So I really think it's important to do. Just throwing it out there, I wonder if talking about real-time data, which was forced on by COVID, has made some of this worse. Because I think it's very hard to understand why real-time data gets revised, because surely it's real-time. You either have it or you don't. And if you don't have it, it's not real-time. It's the way you might think about it. Now, of course, you can have partial real-time data. You can have a real-time 50% sample of something, but is that word real-time really the way we should be describing this? Because creates this impression that the data is certain when they aren't. And I think that's what creates this gap in understanding between economic data being uncertain and users thinking that it's certain. I'm not sure administrative data is a word, the concept that we now push is really very helpful there. On the sources, errors and omission, I just wonder if, I think we've talked about this, and the fair argument, which is totally reasonable, is the data will change, so it changes, right? Payrolls is an 80% sample to start with, and then 100%. Unemployment benefit claims get reassessed after a period of time, so it's going to be revised. But lots of data are delayed until we have a reasonable confidence that the data are unbiased and meet a certain level of statistical accuracy. So we publish GDP with a certain lag after a quarter, not faster, because it just takes that long to get enough data to feel you have enough confidence in it. And if some of these data are consistently being revised in one direction, maybe we just, it feels like we have to publish it because it's real time, but maybe we just shouldn't, because they just aren't reliable. And with the best will in the world, however much we write about these days aren't reliable, there's an estimate. As soon as it appears on Bulletin, it's a fact. And it's going to be reported that way. And if it's unreliable enough that it gets revised consistently in one direction, maybe we should just wait to publish it until it's unbiased. I think that's what we do in a lot of aspects. Finally, on the cost of this, you can see a lot of it here in the trusted data, how we use it. There's a clear cost for monetary policy. Setting interest rates when you can't really be sure where the unemployment rate is kind of hard. Similarly with job growth. I think there's a potential cost actually for welfare, because we create mistaken impressions with the public with data that tend to be biased in one direction. Or the public just switch off because this stuff is always wrong, so why don't they listen to it? And that's both a cost to them. I think I was looking actually at Google Trends redundancy searches, where there's an enormous spike on the 12th of November. And I was trying to figure out why. I threw something out in the office, but that was the day there was all this call for the leadership challenge to Keir Starmer. And someone said, well, why on earth is that make people worried about their job? To that extent. It was also the day after the labour market release in November, when payroll surprisingly fell. And the previous months was revised down, and there was a lot of talk of unemployment jumping. And there was a massive spike in redundancy searches. So I think it has a real cost on people, and it makes actually saying any public policy or having any fact-based discussion really difficult because you can't start from a trust in it. So that's the cost. As I say, welcome all the changes.
Thanks very much, Rob. That's delivering some hard truths. I see, James, you look like you're biting your tongue, just trying to. I suppose I should let you come back and say. I thought I'd just start off by asking the panel, because we did have the labour force survey today. We had the jobs data this morning, and so we've got inactivity apparently is back at the pre-pandemic levels. Unemployment is at a 5-year high. Female unemployment is lower than male unemployment. Youth unemployment is rising. So, I mean, these are quite important stats. I mean, how far do we trust them? Rob, I'll start. You seem to be the biggest skeptic on the panel. So,
yeah, do you know what? And I set off saying I think one of them I was going to welcome the changes, which I genuinely want to be one of the most. Well, put it this way: I wrote. We have 3 pages a day. I wrote 2.5 on trying to decide whether employment was weak or not. To going through the revisions and trying to add it up across the whole range of data. So skeptical. What I would say though is also it's fantastic that we have the range of data on the labour market published on that day, because it does let you look at a lot of different sources to try and work out yourself where the truth is. If we just have the LFS or just payrolls and not the level of detail explaining how that's calculated in the LFS, we would see.
Anna, are you on the skeptical side? Was today's data? I mean, we have, as James said, the response rate is back up to levels before the pandemic. So why should we trust it any less than we did then?
Well, I say the story of from the headline data today is plausible. And yes, the sample size, I mean, in business survey terms, the sample size has always been enormous, even at its weakest. So you should have always been reasonably confident that at least the headline measures are telling you something relatively sensible. The challenge has always been if you want to dig into them and do any sub-analysis, that's where it starts to get weaker. And then, of course, you've got the Bank of England helpfully picking out the best of the other labour market sources to help supplement the NFS. But inevitably, you do wonder, and that is sad, particularly for me because I started at DWP in my career and playing with the labour market data and got to play in the disaggregated labour market data as well, which was fantastic. And so it's particularly sad for what I always thought was like the best bit of government stats to be rather weaker.
And Rebecca, as Rob was saying, the HMRC data, or I think maybe it was you, Anna, just saying the HMRC data is not as reliable as it used to be. Obviously, that the administrative data, or if that's wrong, is it?
I'm waiting.
But so there's problems with the administrative data as well. The HMRC data, it seems, as well as the ONS. So again, on this morning's numbers, do you think that they're believable or not?
Okay, so I guess one thing to highlight, I like your Joni Mitchell quote. So basically, what's happened here with the labour market statistics has highlighted the importance of surveys, right? Surveys can tell us things that admin data cannot tell us and never will be able to tell us. So I think there's that, but then the other sort of flip side of that is that this incident has also told us that although admin data can't tell us everything, it can tell us a lot. So it's been great to have these additional sources to be able to draw up a picture of what's going on when we had these deficiencies in the surveys. So I guess I just want to push back against this thing that admin data is wrong or something, or can be revised. The admin data tell us something very different from a survey because they have not been designed to tell us these things that you find in a survey. They are artifacts of various processes, and they take a huge amount of investment to turn into something that looks like information. So anyway, I think what we've seen here is highlighted the benefits of both of these bits of data to draw up a nice picture of the labour market. There have been deficiencies in surveys. They're not fully back to where we want them to be, I think, as a user community. So I'm glad to see that there's further steps to be taken to improve the labour market statistics.
Just before you have the last minute on this, Jen. Keir Starmer is always pointing out that employment has risen under Labour, but if you look at the payroll numbers, on this point about their 2 different data sets, it does lead to some confusion.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, maybe I start on the labour market data and then wanted to come on to some of the things that Rob said about errors, if that's okay. So I mean, on the labour market data, my view is that this release actually feels very coherent, and actually there was a period running up to just about up to September where it was quite tricky, and what happened was we put all those additional resources into the labour force survey, and we drove up the sample size, and we found more employed people is what happened, because the survey became more accurate as we got the sample size back to where it should have been. And it just so happens that was a period where on the payroll side, and the economy more broadly, the economy was weakening and payrolls are coming down. So we had that lack of coherence. From September, we got to where we should be in terms of the sample size for the labour force survey, and since that point, I think broadly it's been moving, reflecting developments in the economy rather than what we're doing to improve the survey. And I thought, and in the reporting too, it's quite clearly quite an obvious story broadly I think it was, you know, a coherent, plausible release. Personally, there's always some things that we dig into a bit more, but overall, on the area, yeah, I think it was probably the conversation update probably a better way. On the bias, I mean, and like completely agree with everything Rebecca said on the difference between admin data and a survey. An admin data source is something on the labour market. It's in no way a sample in the way that we do say for our admin data, particularly actually the RTI one, that the first release is a flash release and it's incomplete and has lower quality. So you know, it's an interesting question, and I definitely agree. We need to get better on how we set this out and to make it clearer about whether you ought to adjust added administrative data, which is purely the reflection of what's in the tax system at that point in time, or the benefit system, to anticipate how it will evolve in a month's time. For the claimant count, for example, one thing that's actually happening is so someone loses their job and they seek benefits, and they're on the claimant count because by default they are you know, required to search for work, but they also may be going through a capability to work process, and when that concludes, what happens is that person may be judged unable to work, and what the DWP does is go back retrospectively and say, oh well, this person may be required to search for work, but they were unable to, and so they revise it down. We can probably be clearer about that process, so it's clearer what's happening on. But it's important to realise that, as Rebecca said, the admin data is different from the survey. I mean, on the kind of errors from manual processes, I think it's important to say on this, you know, that it's unforgivable not to learn from them, and the important thing to do is to kind of take what's happened, figure out what's the root cause. It's quite often people being overworked, and then take steps to make sure it doesn't happen again. If you don't do that, that is unforgivable. You know, have the conditions not to make that kind of error.
Thanks. One thing I think how that deteriorates. Obviously, when you have line, you can just say before that, and then have that say work. But in the sense, you shall find that there hasn't been a under problem. 6.5% on average of your budget work on the between 25 and 25 this year. So there's two explanations between the two. One is that there's quite a lot of safety issue, no one there brought bad news up. But at the same time, there's lots of money going into the see. How do you square it? It's because the money didn't go into survey. It went into the well, it's actually enough that the integrated data service, the total of what was spent there, goes into the hundreds of millions.
So that was a massive expansion in activity that you know, it was, to be clear on this, that came about between the office, the Cabinet Office and the Treasury, each have a hand in how that project came about. But it had the classic problem, in my view, that it had too broad an ambition and not specifically anchored around a set of use cases. It was kind of more put all the data together in this technology And that has been a really big, there's capabilities that have been built that can be pivoted to something else, but the story in the past is more spending money on the wrong things than not having enough money.
And so how many staff are you gonna have to let go? Is it like a 10% efficiencies you were talking about, or is it?
Well, so just to be clear on that, the ONS is blessed flat nominal budget. So broadly, give or take, I mean, there's pay in inflation, broadly flat headcount. What we have to do over time is to step up the amount of resources we have to prepare for the next census. And so my conclusion from that is if we want to maintain momentum behind improving economic statistics, we need to release them initially. The big thing that will do that is not double running 2 labour force surveys, right? We've got Transform 1 and the LFF. But yeah, we don't have a problem with people or releasing people to do more.
Can I get people to think about questions? I've got one, just one more. So we're always beating you up at the ONS, but is that fair? Is Rebecca, internationally, you've been out in Australia talking about statistics. Internationally, are we worse than elsewhere? Is the US is having its own job data problems? Eurostat is perfect either, but so are we worse than elsewhere, or are we no worse than anywhere else?
So Rebecca.
Okay. I think statistical agencies can definitely learn from one another. So the Australian Bureau of Statistics, for example, has developed a infrastructure to share lots of different data sources together. So sort of a version of the integrated data service that was being built here. And it's done that first, it has had that in place for some time. But I guess as far as I understand it, one of their approaches has been to do that incrementally. So they've built it incrementally around use cases rather than as a sort of a one-off big project. So I think there's definitely things that different agencies can learn from another. I think that many of the challenges that statistical agencies face, so you said, for example, that funding wasn't short or something, somewhat, you said that.
Judge Simon is basically saying that there's been quite a lot of
Yeah. And of course, there's choices on how you spend that money. But the sort of overall situation that statistical agencies find themselves in is this increased demand, faster. Right. It has to be faster, has to be more granular, has to be more accurate. And there's this expectation that that's doable on a relatively limited budget. So I think that's a common challenge.
Okay. Right. I'll take 3 questions at a